before we go into the lab, we're gonna read a report that talks about the acidity of beverages, so it deals exactly with what you're gonna do in the lab today. And this is from a scientific journal, and so it's exactly how a lab report should be written up. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna read it, and we're gonna closely read it to make sure that we understand who wrote it, who published it, what their objectives were, what their conclusions were, and how they backed up those conclusions. Because that's exactly what you guys are doing in your lab reports. So then we're also gonna look at the structure of how they wrote it, and then we're gonna come up with some ideas of how you can make your lab reports look more like that. Because this is a professionally written one, and in college they expect you to write like professionals. So I'm gonna pass this out, and then you guys are gonna get about 10 minutes to read it on your own. And I'm also gonna hand out a guided reading sheet to help you along with, what you should pick out, what you should, have stand out to you in the lab report. And then we're gonna take some time and go over the answers for the class. And then in your next lab report, you can use what you learned in here as kind of a conclusion for what you find in the lab today. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. They're not stapled, I forgot to do that. So they're stacked every other, so just grab it one. Why are someone supposed to be in the PC? There should be 7 students in this room. I want you guys to read quietly while you're doing this, and I don't want to see your phones, otherwise I'm going to take them. You may want to take out a pen or a highlighter to highlight the important things along the way. I'm going to pass out also the guided questions. I'll have to close read the report. One thing I forgot to mention is you can just skip through the methods section. So just make sure you put most of your focus on the introduction, the results, and then the discussion. So to begin, let's just talk about a little different reading strategies that you guys use to tackle this reading. What were some things that you guys did? How did you approach it? Yeah.
Read the question first, then look for the reading.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so you kind of hunted for the answers?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I just did the answers that I went.
Okay. So just kind of read it and then follow along with the guided?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else do anything different? I saw some of you waited until you had read the whole thing to kind of go through and answer the questions. So So there's different ways to approach it. What I typically do is I'll skim the entire article first and make some notes with my highlighter or my pencil and kind of pick out the most important things. So some things I highlighted were, just the purpose of the study and then some of their major conclusions, just so that I kind of knew that those were the key things that this report was about. So let's go over what those were. So question number 1, it said, what journal was this report published in? When was it published and who are the authors? Who has the answers to those questions? Yeah.
It was published in the Journal of Dental Sciences. It was published July 21st, 2011.
Yep.
And
they're difficult to pronounce.
Yeah,
Those
the
two
authors
people
are
are
different, yeah.
Okay, so we can find all this information right at the top of the report. This is just like your title page. We should be able to find out when you did your study, who did the study, and if it was published, where it was published. And so what this tells us is that this was a pretty recent study, just done about 3 years ago, and it was in a very highly affirmed journal, so we know that the study has been peer-reviewed and looked over by many different scientists who've been confirmed. So then number 2, what are the indicators for erosive potential of food or drink? Who is that one? Yeah.
pH and TA.
Okay, yep. And then, so the next question was, what does TA stand for? Because I'm assuming that we all know what pH is, being in AP chemistry. But what is TA?
What?
What does TA stand for? Yeah.
Measurable acidity.
Okay, and can you define that? What does that mean?
Do you want me to define it?
Go ahead.
Alright. I have the measure of the total acid content in a beverage.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're doing in the lab today, right? And what you guys did yesterday. We're looking at a bunch of different beverages and seeing how acidic they are. So that tells us that this study is directly applicable to what we're doing in the lab. So now, let's go to question number 4. What was the purpose of this study? What are they trying to predict?
I guess they were trying to evaluate how well the pH and pH variable acidity of beverages can predict dental and normal erosion.
Yeah, exactly. And where did you find that answer?
In the background/purpose, like right at the very front.
Okay, yep. And so that was right at the beginning of the study, right? So that's just like your guys' lab report. First thing you put on there is your objective, so that the reader can see what your goal is. So now number 5, what was the results or conclusions of this study? Let's have someone who has an answer. Yeah, Justin.
Those with lower pH tend to cause more enamel erosion.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Did anyone else find any other conclusions and results?
I asked that equation.
Okay, yeah, they tried to find out an equation to figure it out, right? Yep.
There's a weak relation between the acidity and enamel loss.
Yeah. Anyone find anything else? Yep, Heidi?
The pH identifies it like in the first few minutes, but the TA is like a measure of like overall how much it's gonna erode.
Yeah, exactly. So the TA is what you're doing in lab today, right? So it can be a direct value that tells you how erosive the beverage that you study is to your teeth. So what 2 beverages did they find in this study were caused the most erosion? Pepsi and Magnum? Yeah, Magnum's a type of soda, right? So we all know that soda's really bad for your teeth. Okay. And so then, what were some of the things that you guys came up with how you can tie this into your lab today? You all should be shooting up your hands.
The
then what conclusions can you make that tie in this article and report along with the study that you're doing in lab? That's something that we didn't necessarily cover in your lab report. Guys have any ideas?
Acknowledgements and references.
Exactly, so you could use this as a reference to your lab report and say, this study backs up what we found. And that makes your report even more, even that much more academic, because then people see, oh yeah, what they found is backed up by a scientific journal. So we know that it's true, and it just confirms the results even more. Yeah.
Are we required to find academic things to back up our lab reports for our lab reports?
Often in college you are, yeah.
Are we here, is the question.
That's something that you guys haven't done yet, but that's something that Mr. Rear and I have been talking about, since that's what, I had a class at Grand Valley that we had to do that every single lab report we did. So we're just kind of introducing you guys to this idea. And so then the last question said, what did you learn about writing a lab report that you can apply to your future lab reports? What did you guys learn about the structure, how it was written?
Have a lot more detail.
Yeah. What else did you guys notice? Yep.
You define words that maybe some people don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to think about who your audience is and define something that they may not know. Help them understand it more. You can't just assume that everyone knows everything about chemistry. What else? What about the structure? Specifically the conclusion. How did they word things? Yeah.
They reference the calculations.
Yeah, yeah. So they always reference back to what they found. So they supported their conclusions with their data. A lot of you guys have been writing conclusions that just say, this is what we found, and then you forget to say, this is the support to go with it. You just write, this is the conclusion, and then you forget to write the percent error or the percent yield. So you have to support your conclusion with your data. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything, right? What else about the structure? Did you guys notice that they use the absence of the words I or we or the team or me and things like that? Did you guys see any of those words?
No.
That's what we've been talking about every lab report, right? How that shouldn't be included in the conclusion.
Should be facts, not.
Exactly. Your conclusion should not be subjective. It should just be clearly objective. This is what was found. How many of you guys found this helpful? Good. Awesome. So we're probably going to do more things like this for future lab reports, because this just helps you understand better what you're doing in the lab and how you can apply it to everyday life. Make sure you save these, because you'll probably want to reference them for your lab reports.